Welcome to the Private Lenders Podcast with your hosts from Hard Money Bankers, Jason Balin and Chris Haddon. This podcast is sponsored by hardmoneymastermind.com.
Hey everyone, Private Lenders Podcast. Thank you for checking out the show wherever you may be watching or listening to this. If you can give us a like, a comment, share it with somebody, we would really, really appreciate it. Today we're talking about Sales 101 Private Lenders. I'm going to start with a little clip from an awesome movie called The Wolf of Wall Street, which is hopefully everyone in the audience has seen it because it's a fantastic business movie and just really entertaining show. And it has a lot to do with sales. And Jordan Belfort was then and is now one of the premier sales trainers in the world. And there's one scene in the movie where he's pumping up his brokers, right? His stockbrokers. And he's talking about something to the effect of, are you behind on your rent? Pick up the phone and start dialing. Do you need to get your car repaired? Pick up the phone and start dialing. And he had all of these examples, and he was just making his point over and over and over and hammering it home that you need to be on the phone selling people. Granted, we don't sell stocks. We're not cold calling anybody. We work incoming leads. It's not exactly like that, but it's a little bit like that. I think that loan originators in private lending and conventional mortgage can get lazy. They get lazy on their sales. They rely too much on email, and we're going to go into some specifics on that today.
We have a great product to sell, all of us, right? We're selling money, right? It's private capital. Yes, there's institutional capital out there. Yes, there's other one-off individual lenders out there that might be deploying capital at cheaper rates. We're one of the most expensive lenders in town, right? And I get that, and we require the borrowers to bring a lot of money to the table, but it's still a very good, superior product, right? It's local, private capital. We have full control over it. We can close quick. We don't need unnecessary documents. If the deal makes sense, it makes sense. If we got to rush a deal to get it to the closing table tomorrow, we'll put all hands on deck and do it, right? You make a lot of money per transaction. You do what you got to do. There's a lot of flexibility in this space, and you got to have confidence when you're selling and you're working with local real estate investors, right? If they say, "Hey, well, what can you do?" Kiavi's offering this. Like, you're not selling. You don't have to sell against Kiavi. They're not your competition. It is a completely different product, right? If you're trying to sell versus Kiavi or Lending Home or any Lending One, I don't even know. Half these people change their names all the time. Like, you're going to lose on that. Like, you got to get out of that mindset of that you're trying to compete with them. It's a different product completely. If you try to compete with them, you're going to go out of business. You're going to charge nothing, and you're going to have way too high of a leverage or exposure. It's not going to work. The value we're bringing to the table is we're local in your community. We have private capital. We have our own money. We're flexible. We can close quickly. We can do what you want. Step one is get on the freaking phone with these borrowers. That is step one. There's no going back and forth on email. It's get on the phone. Yes, in a perfect world, you would meet them, but I mean, get on the phone with them. That's the first part. If a broker sends you a deal, hey, I appreciate it. Let's set up a call with the borrower. Let me ask a few questions, and let's see if this is something we can do. You got to do old school sales, needs analysis, building relationships. You know how many deals that we've done where the borrower buys a property for $200,000 and we can only lend $100,000 because that's what we're comfortable lending? None of those would ever transact if we didn't communicate with them over the phone or potentially meet with them so they understood. I'll give you an example. Here's two little examples. So somebody emails me and says, "Hey, Jason, I'm trying to buy this property for $200,000. How much can you lend?" And you go back to them and say, "Hey, I can only lend $100,000. This is what we charge. Blah 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 blah." I don't know. However the process goes. They're going to immediately be like, "Yeah, that doesn't work. I'm looking for higher financing." It's done. Now think about this script. Somebody emails me and says, "Hey, I'm trying to buy this property for $200,000. How much can you lend?" I'm looking for the best deal I can get. Right? I'm shopping around. I can get the best deal. Right? And let's just say it's not that great of a deal. That's why you're doing a lower loan amount. I'm kind of exaggerating here a little bit. He says, "Sure, no problem. Happy to help. I'm actually a local private lender. I've been lending for XYZ years. I know this area pretty well. What's your phone number? I'll give you a call real quick." Right? No problem. pick up the phone, you speak to them, you say, hey, it's Jason at Hard Money Bankers. We've been lending locally for 18 years. We lend only our own money out. I work with a lot of the big real estate investors locally. I know this area really well. We can close quickly. I understand your situation. Happy to help. To be honest, in this particular deal, I know you're buying it for 200. The numbers are a little bit tight. If we could lend $100,000, is that something that you can make work? And potentially they'd be like, yeah, I wasn't really looking to put that much money into the deal. Be like, okay, well, how much money could you put into the deal, right? And maybe they say something unreasonable, like I want 100% financing, and there's not much you can do in that case. You explain to them why, see if they have cross collateral, stuff like that. But if they're like, yeah, I'd like to put in $50,000, so 150, right? Loan amount. Buy for 200, need 150. Be like, yeah, that makes sense. Again, I can see if that's something I can do. If we had to come in a little bit lower, could you make 120,000 work or something, right? Like you're communicating with them, you're building rapport, you're negotiating with them, right? You're wearing a lot of different hats all at once to determine what makes the most sense for them on that particular project and you on that particular project. Like people think like, oh, you guys just lowball everybody and you're not serious. We're not lowballing. We're having a conversation to determine what works. If I could do a $120,000 loan, even though we'd be willing to do 150, I'd rather do 120. It's less risk. It's right. And that might work for them. There's lots of borrowers that we talk to that don't always necessarily want the highest leverage, the higher exposure. They might say they do, right? But then you communicate with them and they realize it's like, okay, yeah, I am comfortable doing a $125,000 loan. These are things that can't happen over email. These are things that have to happen over the phone.
Yeah, I mean, that's the main takeaway for this whole podcast. And it's something that we're working with our own team at HMB on too, to improve this, because it's easy to get lazy. It's easy to, you should never quote a loan on email. That's your opportunity to close a sale. Think about if you've ever had a sales job or been in that situation where you have an opportunity to close a deal. Treat that as something that is very important, because that is the most important thing. Without signing up clients and funding loans, like you don't have much of a business going on. So just shooting out a lazy ass quote by email being like, yeah, we can lend 150 minus 50 and here's the price, is just super lazy. That's not the way a sales process goes. Like Jason was saying, you get on the phone, you ask them the right questions, you build rapport with them, you build credibility with them, and then you ask for the sale. You ask to close the deal. I think we can lend probably $200,000 on this one. It's going to be 3 points, 12.99 for a 1-year term with interest only, payments made monthly. Is this something you can work with? Yes, maybe, no. If maybe, okay, what can you work with? Let's try to make a deal here, right? And that's when, like we say all the time when we're doing consulting and inner circle stuff, like you're wearing the sales hat and the underwriter hat at the same time, right? It's a balance. But this doesn't work on email. Like even some people think sending out a term sheet is the right way to give your initial quote. And that's number one, a waste of time. Number two, not effective enough, because they just, you give them the control. You give them the frame control. They can take your term sheet and go shop it. And they think it's only about the numbers. They think it's not about the fact that you can execute on this closing, that you lend your own funds, that you're local and know if this is a good deal or a bad deal and all the stuff. It's just numbers, and you're giving them that control and allowing them to go shop it. And on the other side of things, you could be on the phone, you could be on Zoom, you could be in person, having this conversation, building a relationship, and trying to close a deal. That's what we want to really emphasize for anyone watching or listening. And also, like I was saying, like we need to do more of this with our own team, and that is top of our to-do list.
Yeah, and keep in mind, everything is done verbal. You don't need to prep everything and spend time on working on things. Listen, if the numbers aren't going to work based off what the borrower tells you the numbers are, right, off their ARV, it's not going to work off your ARV, because chances are your ARV should be lower than their ARV, because you should be more conservative as the lender, right? So like when we're having conversations with borrowers up front, it's like, okay, what's your purchase price? What's your construction cost? Have you done projects like this before? You're going through the motions where it's like you're doing needs analysis, you're building rapport, you're trying to get some stuff in. We don't ask them to fill out a loan application. Why do I need a loan application? I'm asking them all the questions anyways, and potentially taking notes while that's happening. So I know potentially if it's going to be something that works or doesn't work, right? I'm selling and I'm an underwriter at the same time. I'm wearing multiple hats. That's why we're very passionate about doing all this ourselves and not necessarily having, admins doing it. I'm not saying a loan officer can't do it, but like an admin or a script taker doing it, or just somebody filling out a loan application up front. Like, we like doing this because it's killing a lot of birds with one stone, and we're learning from it as well. Like when our loan officers or our partners reach out to us, like, I'm going to ask them the 10 or so questions that they should know the answers to. If they ask me about a deal, I'll be like, hey, what's your thoughts on this one? This is what the numbers are. I'll be like, cool. What's their exit strategy? What's their credit? What's their credit score? What's their if it's a rental property, what's their lease amount every month? How much should they buy the property for if it's a refinance? Right? Things like that you're asking. So like when I'm on the phone talking to borrowers, they don't know that I'm underwriting them at the same time. I'm just asking questions. There was a story back in the day when a really sophisticated real estate investor hit me up and was like, okay, well, what's the next step? I said, we're good. We can proceed. And he was like, well, what do you mean? You haven't taken a loan application? You haven't pulled my credit? I was like, I asked you every question without you even knowing where I was getting at. So I know that you're qualified. You told me you had 10 rental properties that was collateralized with Wells Fargo, and your most recent one you just refinanced out a month ago. You got good credit because they wouldn't have done it. But if you didn't have good credit, right? You have experience. So like, I know these things just by asking them questions verbally. All of this has to be verbally. I'll tell you another good, interesting stat. 50% of our term sheets that we send out close, right? A lot of people, they send out multiple term sheets a day. Again, like what Chris indicated, if you're sending out term sheets just to send out term sheets, you're wasting time and you're just giving them the opportunity to shop around. That's like an institutional thing and a bank thing. Oh, everyone gets it. You want a term sheet, you get a term sheet. You want a term sheet, you get a term sheet. Everyone gets a term sheet. I don't have time to do term sheets for people, and it's a waste of time. I don't need to give them the information. I'm verbally going over everything with them. If they agree to proceed, then I'll say, great, that works. Do me a favor, send me the purchase contracts. If I have that, then I have the entity you're buying it in. I have the title company, your earnest money deposit, your actual purchase price, the formal names of the signers, right? I have all that information, and then I can split the term sheet. And it also gives them a commitment, like a emotional commitment, because they sent in documents to us, right? And then I have everything that we can proceed. So we can't emphasize enough related to this sales process is talking to people on the phone, building rapport, underwriting them at the same time, and doing things verbally. There's no point to do any of this other stuff unless you're not verbally going through it. Do it first.
That is the moral of the story for today, guys. So hopefully you got some value from this podcast. If you did, please do share it with somebody. If somebody else is either in the private lending business or interested in it, send this podcast over to them, and we would really appreciate it. We'll see you next time on the show. And in between now and then, we'll see everyone inside hardmoneymastermind.com.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of the Private Lenders Podcast. Please note that the opinions stated by all the speakers on this show are only opinions and not intended for legal, financial, or accounting advice. Please make sure to always check with your own legal, accounting, and financial professionals. If you enjoyed this episode of the Private Lenders Podcast, we'd appreciate it if you would spread the word. Make sure to check out hardmoneymastermind.com, the #1 free community for new and experienced private and hard money lenders.